안녕하세요. 저는 효과적인 마케팅을 위한 구독 서비스 워크의 이창욱입니다. 글로벌 크리에이티비티 페스티벌 카느 라이언즈의 서울 이벤트로 여러분들과 만나 뵙게 돼서 반갑습니다. 2020년 코로나19는 어제와 전혀 다른 오늘을 만들었고, 소비자들은 새로운 라이프 스타일을 이미 기업과 브랜드보다 먼저 적응하기 시작하였습니다. 저 역시 여러분들과 한 분 한 분 대면으로 만나 뵙지 못하고 이렇게 재택근무를 하고 있는데요. 이번 카느 라이언즈 서울 이벤트를 통해 기존의 마케팅 광고 방식에서 벗어나 새로운 아이디어와 접근 방법을 공부하면서 과연 글로벌적으로 어떠한 광고 전략이 새로운 화두로 떠오르고 있는지, 그리고 이를 학습해서 나만의, 우리 회사만의 실행 전략으로 창조하는 기회로 만드시길 바랍니다. 그럼 지금부터는 저희 워크에 대한 간단한 소개를 드리겠습니다. 워크는 지금으로부터 약 35년 전인 1985년 광고회사만 많고 광고 트렌드를 제안해줄 회사는 없다라는 데이비드 오길비의 아이디어에서 사업을 시작하였습니다. 마케터 여러분들 요즘 어떤 고민 많이 하고 계시는지요? 먼저 이제 막 유튜브와 페이스북 광고에 적응했는데 틱톡과 같은 새로운 채널과 새로운 테크놀로지가 쏟아지고 있습니다. 코로나19로 인한 예기치 못한 상황들에 영향을 받는 다양한 소비자의 소비 패턴을 제대로 파악해야 하고요. 이로 인해 시장은 우리가 생각했던 것 이상 빠르게 변화하고 있습니다. 이러한 마켓 환경에서 팩트가 아닌 개인적인 의견이나 추측에만 의존한다면 수억 또는 수십억까지 낭비하고 신뢰마저 잃을 수 있습니다. 저희 워크는 비효율적인 마케팅으로부터 세상을 구하기 위해 존재합니다. 인사이트와 팩트 기반으로 제공되는 워크의 정보는 여러분이 자신있게 결정을 내리고 매니지먼트 분들의 동의를 얻을 수 있는 충분한 근거 자료로 활용하실 수 있습니다. 워크에서 제공되는 컨텐츠는 리서치 자료에서부터 케이스 스터디, 그리고 데이터까지 다양한 접근으로 여러분들의 비즈니스 선택을 서포트하고 있습니다. 그중 저희 고객사분들이 가장 유용하게 활용하시는 3가지의 컨텐츠를 소개드리겠습니다. 먼저 워크 리서치입니다. 인하우스 전문가들이 제공하는 마케팅 인사이트 자료입니다. 예를 들어 최근 우리 모두가 주목하고 있는 게임 시장입니다. 게임 시장이 주목받고 있는 것은 우리 모두가 알지만 우리 회사와 우리 브랜드는 게임 산업에서 어떻게 마케팅 기회를 찾고 액션 전략을 어떻게 세울지 워크 인사이트 자료가 도와드리겠습니다. 워크 케이스 스터디입니다. 125개의 국가, 18,000개 이상 우수한 마케팅 사례 연구에서 상품 카테고리와 지역, 타겟 소비자 연령대를 포함한 다양한 필터링 기능으로 내가 지금 필요로 하는 마케팅 연구 사례를 제공합니다. 각 케이스 스터디에서는 해당 캠페인에 대한 컨셉, 소요된 예산부터 스토리 구성과 최종 결과물에 대한 리뷰까지 뎁스 높은 레슨 리포트로 여러분들 업무에 활용하실 수가 있습니다. 마지막 워크 데이터는 실제 데이터를 기반으로 효과적인 광고 지출을 계획하실 수 있습니다. 내가 플레이하고 있는 산업에서는 어떤 채널에 얼마만큼의 광고를 집행할지 단순히 여러분들 경험과 소위 감으로 결정하는 게 아닌 객관적이면서 검증된 자료로부터 자신 있는 결정을 내리는 데 워크가 도와드리겠습니다. 2020년 9월 기준 다양한 산업과 상품 프로바이더 글로벌 1200곳 이상의 고객사들이 워크를 사용하고 계십니다. 이제 저는 여러분들과 함께 다음 마케팅 성공 케이스를 만들길 기다리고 있습니다. 자세한 문의는 work.com을 통해 연락주시면 친절히 답변 드리겠습니다. 마지막으로 여러분, 그리고 여러분 가족의 건강을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Hello and welcome to this Lions Live presentation from WARC on effectiveness in the age of e-commerce. Now, this is a timely topic. COVID-19 is forcing brands across categories to shift faster into e-commerce than they would have otherwise. And in this session, we'll be explaining what this shift means for marketers and giving you some actionable ideas for how to respond. We'll hear from leading marketers at Hershey, Procter & Gamble, GSK and more, plus of course all the expertise on WARC. We'll be looking at why the shift to e-commerce will force some marketers back to basics and why it will change our approach to media. Most of all, we'll be asking, do marketers need to change their game? if they want to stay effective.
Well, when COVID-19 hit, we saw consumer behavior shift almost immediately. We tended to sell about half of our products at the front of the store, and we saw a shift immediately to larger formats, to packs in the aisle, and people stocking up. Behavior that we usually think of more around Halloween, when people buy large format packs for trick-or-treating, etc. And it immediately shifted to Amazon, Walmart.com, Target.com. We began selling a lot more online.
That was Jill Baskin, CMO of Hershey, just one brand doubling down on e-commerce as a result of COVID-19. And there are plenty more. In the last 10 years, the US e-commerce penetration rates increased by 10 percentage points. In the last 3 months, it's increased by 11. For packaged goods brands in particular, the change has been swift and profound. So, where does that leave us? Well, here's what we're seeing in WARC content. First, the rapid growth of e-commerce during COVID-19 is both an opportunity and a threat. It's a time when consumers have been forced out of usual purchase habits, and many have tried something new. It's a time when new brand habits will be formed. According to Kantar, 56% of households with kids have tried new products during lockdown, which they'll continue to buy. Second, the shift is increasing the power of the big platforms. In the West, that of course means Amazon plus those retailers that can combine online and offline. In China, it means players like Alibaba, JD, WeChat. As more social platforms in the West add payment facilities, marketers will have a growing range of platforms to sell through. But bigger brands are also looking for direct relationships with customers. Last year, Nike pulled its sales through Amazon as it wanted to take direct control of its e-commerce. Now, the key here is data. Whoever owns the data owns the relationship. So as these trends accelerate, how should your strategy change? And how can you make sure this disruption becomes an opportunity, not a threat? We've picked out 3 key implications for brands. Number 1, the rise of e-commerce is a real back to basics moment. When we buy online, we tend to buy slightly differently. For one, we tend to buy bigger pack sizes, and we don't buy on impulse. For brands like Hershey's, that means a shift to less profitable bulk formats. So the challenge for them is to rethink the fundamentals of pack and pricing to drive profits as well as revenues. And that back to basics approach is even more apparent at brands with direct-to-consumer relationships. One marketer who has seen that up close is Cheryl Calverley, Managing Director of Eve Sleep in the UK. She has worked both in FMCG and now at an e-commerce brand, and she can see where the new opportunities lie.
You know, being a sort of D2C business, you're asking consumers to gamble on very little sort of stimulus when they choose to buy online. And in some products that matters less. So, I mean, look, if you get your online purchase of a bit of fast fashion wrong, it's not a disaster. You might have wasted 20 quid, but it's not a disaster. If you get your online purchase of a big ticket item that fundamentally affects your wellness, such as a mattress, wrong, it's a major thing. And so what you lose in the ability to talk to customers and to let customers touch and feel your product, you have to make up for in what you build into your customer experience. So you have to build value into your customer experience to counteract the loss of value in the face-to-face interaction and the ability to touch product, packaging, all those kind of bits of the marketing mix that we can't access and customers can't access. And so our effectiveness, the effectiveness of our customer experience and the impact of that on our brand is significant. And if I invest in the brand and the customer experience is wrong, the investment will be ineffective investment.
So effective marketers in e-commerce need to think carefully about the total experience of their brand. Not just the product and the promotion, but the whole buying, shipping and unboxing process. If we go back to FMCG, this brings marketing much closer to supply chain. And this is an area where WARC's sister brand, Flywheel, has been working closely with leading brands. We caught up with Flywheel's Patrick Miller and his client, Tiffany Lyles, at Procter & Gamble.
Supply chain is a top line growth driver, for e-commerce. It's not a cost cutting exercise, and it also drives second moment of truth. And so we see vulnerabilities for brands, that are impacted by damages like leaking, broken trigger sprays, bruised fruit, et cetera. That's all damaging that second moment of truth. And supply chain is the opportunity to make second moment of truth, outstanding and take advantage of the uniqueness of these platforms.
One of the most important things that a marketer can do is drive demand. But if that product is not available in the right spot at the right time to ship to the consumer, then we have definitely failed together as a unit. So as we continue to use supply chain as a top line growth driver, we need to make sure that those two are inherently linked, both in everyday driving demand, but also those different events where it's most important that we have where there are more consumer eyeballs. So on, for example, Amazon's Prime Day or Black Friday or Cyber Monday or around holidays or any time of year when you're really trying to drive, again, more and more demand, we need to make sure that we know as supply chain where that demand is being driven to and how we deliver to the consumer. That's the most important thing we can do. And over the last 3 to 4 years, we have really at P&G made sure that marketing and supply chain are hand in hand and locked at the hip in delivering for the consumer.
Well, as brands create awareness for products, they need to go a step further and not just drive the eyeballs, but understand what the rest of the experience is going to be, for that customer. How does that item show up? Unboxing moments are no longer just for Apple products. Today, it's even for toilet paper. How does the product arrive, and what's it like to open up the product and then put it away, in a pantry at home?
The other big difference, particularly for direct-to-consumer brands, is the ability to measure the lifetime value of a customer. Now that changes the way marketers identify target audiences and calculate payback on their spend. Let's hear from Cheryl Calverley again.
I think as product businesses have shifted D2C with the growth of e-commerce and the ability for now a product business to have that one-to-one relationship with the customer, and I'm very wary of one-to-one relationship as a phrase because it's quite frankly BS, but the ability for a product business to know which customer has bought its product and know if that customer comes back and buys it again means that you are able to build investment models with a very different lens, and you're able to overinvest on customer acquisition in certain areas in the full knowledge that over the 2 to 3 year horizon they will pay back and pay back in spades. That might be because they repeat. That might be because they are highly likely to recommend you to someone else, so they become an organic sort of sales channel. A lot of the guys have got this very right. So a lot of the new D2C businesses invest a lot of time and effort on things like refer a friend, recommend a friend schemes. And inherently that is deriving greater lifetime value off a new customer acquisition. You create almost like a pyramid selling scheme for your brand. I think that's the big learning, because I'm not sure product businesses really appreciated that they could do this in the same way as a service business always had.
So there are potentially big changes here in the way these product brands think about effectiveness. And this brings us to our second big implication. The shift to e-commerce is changing media and messaging, particularly a shift in performance marketing. Now, what we're already seeing is a race towards shoppable formats that can take consumers direct to a sale. Messaging will increasingly be expected to sell. The other big change in performance marketing is that we're seeing the big e-commerce platforms set themselves up as media owners. Now, Amazon's ad sales are growing at more than 40% year on year, and companies like Walmart and Target are following suit, developing their own search marketing products. And this shift to e-commerce media is one of the biggest trends in advertising investment right now. And it's already changing the way major brands think. If we go back to Hershey, they are changing the way they plan their budgets to get rid of the old distinctions between marketing spend and what might have been called shopper or trade spend. Let's hear again from Jill Baskin.
So prior to COVID-19, we had an e-com marketing team that operated very separately from the rest of the marketing department. And as e-com has just like hyper expanded for us, we realized we really need to bring those two teams together more. And one place that we could immediately come together was on marketing budgets, so that we spent them all as one budget and thought about it across the entire brand and didn't keep Digicom out separate. Another way was to bring Shopper into the fold. So it's been an interesting and very quick journey to bring all of those budgets together and to plan them together so that we aren't overlapping each other or shingling, as we call it, one offer on top of another. And also to think about, from just a purely strategic point of view, how do we want to reach the customer? How many times do we want to reach the customer? And how do we best utilize that budget?
So where might e-commerce media go next? Well, there are some clues if we look to China, which is several years ahead of Western markets in terms of the development in e-commerce. The big story there is the rise of live streaming, a combination of influencer marketing, video content, and e-commerce. These live stream shopping shows largely take place within e-commerce sites, and they encourage users to stay on those platforms and purchase direct. Now, we caught up with Elijah Whaley of Chinese influencer consultancy Parkloom to explain how it works.
So live streaming e-commerce is commonly likened to QVC or those late night kind of TV shows where people are selling these limited quantity products at some sort of steep discount. But the reality is that live streaming in China is much more interactive than that. Not only can those people that are watching, ask questions or send comments or potentially even kind of interact with each other and stimulate that kind of buying and interactivity of the show itself, but these live streams are actually a form of entertainment in that they're going to have potentially live celebrities on there and interviews and kind of fun, game showish type of things that are going on. And it becomes, in some ways, it's a really good example, actually, of what we call retailtainment. And so this idea that commerce and entertainment become very intertwined in a show. And so that's really what live streaming is in China today.
But this comes at a cost. Customer acquisition costs have been rising online in China, so brands need to combine this selling approach with community. They need to nurture these customers on China's social channels to drive repeat sales and lifetime value. One homegrown brand in the beauty category that has succeeded this way is Perfect Diary.
Perfect Diary is a really phenomenal case of a brand that's gone from zero to hero in just a few years. They were essentially founded and launched in 2016 and became one of the number one best-selling brands on Tmall Taobao in 2018. In 2019, they've been able to replicate that again. They're just hugely impactful in the cosmetics and beauty space. And really, again, what they've done is, instead of focusing and playing the game where everybody else is at that top of the funnel, creating lots of awareness, working with celebrities, programmatic advertising, and maybe content marketing, they have focused on aggregating customers into communities. And so they're said to have over 1 million customers in what we call private traffic in WeChat groups. And these WeChat, and it's not just that they're in private traffic, but they're following this virtual influencer that they've created. And this virtual influencer has become so popular with their core customers that they're actually launching products just around and from this virtual influencer. And so it's really, really fascinating what they've done to really turn customers into long-term loyal advocates for the brand and keep them around by creating this avatar, this character that people really identify and follow and are interested in.
Live streaming is a hot topic right now, but brands need to be aware of the downsides. It works because of the deep discounts brands offer via the influencers, and we've seen brands use this as a way of shifting unwanted stock. But this comes with a risk to reputation and to pricing power, and that leads into our third big implication, and that is that the focus on performance could carry a threat to brand. Now, a recent survey from Ubiquity found that brands were pouring money into e-commerce, but where were they reducing their budgets? Brand advertising. Now, that's not surprising at a time of economic stress, but there is a risk here. One of the big stories of the past decade has been the shift to short-term, performance-driven marketing and the decline of investment in brand. According to some researchers, this has created what's been called a crisis in creative effectiveness. Now, this matters in the world of e-commerce, and we've seen a couple of great examples of why it matters in WARC content. The first is a study from UK insurance company Direct Line Group, which measured the pricing power of two of its brands with near identical products. One, the Churchill brand, was backed by brand advertising. The other was not. What they found was that the Churchill brand commanded a clear pricing advantage over the other brand in online marketplaces. Consumers would pay more for it. Now, the second example comes from Adidas and how their push into e-commerce led to an over-reliance on attribution models. Now, these models are widely used, but they tend to underplay the role brand has on sales. It was only when Adidas invested in econometrics that they realised how important the strength of their brand was to online sales. This is a risk facing many brands who are only now pushing into e-commerce. And we caught up with Jerry Dakin, EMEA Media Director at GSK, to talk about the need for balance, both in the spend and in the way you model effectiveness.
One of the most powerful things about digital and e-commerce media is that it does bring us a lot of real-time live data and statistics that do, to an extent, help us guide and optimize our media. One of the real watch-outs is those numbers and those things that we can track, click-through rates, engagement, aren't always what truly tells us the overall effectiveness of our media. They might tell us the short-term conversion, the last click attribution. They don't necessarily tell us whether it's doing a bigger, better, longer-term job. And it doesn't necessarily help us understand the roles of different channels, certainly channels which don't have clicks and don't have those metrics. So whilst it's important to look at those metrics and to make sure your campaigns are performing against the right ones of those, I always encourage marketers to also take a step back to what's sometimes seen as slightly more old-fashioned forms of measurement, brand lift studies and econometrics and slightly slower moving pieces that ultimately will really help you understand the full mix of your media. I know a lot of companies have quite strong internal initiatives to drive more digital, to catch up with consumers. I think in many cases that is the right thing to do. Many companies have been left behind, but you definitely have to be cautious about going too far. And if you just follow those, digital KPIs, digital channels prove themselves quite well in a silo. But you need to understand how it fits into your whole mix, and when you get to that right point of not needing to do any more digital because you're at the right balance.
So let's summarise. Well, firstly, this is not just about shifting ad dollars. It's about fundamentally reassessing the experience you can offer as a brand and how that experience influences sales. Now, for marketers, that might mean getting closer to supply chain, particularly in FMCG. This could become a key partnership. And if you can, prioritise that first-party data, as this will allow product brands to improve that lifetime value. Now, that might mean collecting this data becomes a marketing objective in itself. Secondly, we're seeing a transformation of performance marketing, and this is all about the platforms, eliminating the friction between advertising and purchase. At a basic level, that means shoppable ads and ad budgets moving into e-commerce sites. Marketers might want to merge e-commerce and shopper investment with paid media budgets so they get a better view of where their money's going and what it's driving. Watch trends like live streaming in China. It's a great pointer to where the Western platforms are heading. And the key for advertisers here is to understand how the platforms they're selling through are evolving, as this determines where the future battlegrounds will lie. But third and finally, don't forget there's a danger here, that we accelerate the shift to short-termism we've seen over the past decade. Don't rely on attribution studies alone to direct marketing investment. And remember, strong brands remain key to success online. Marketers will still need to focus time, energy, and yes, budget to creative brand building. And that's really crucial. We may be moving very quickly to the age of e-commerce, but for the most effective marketers, creativity and brand will remain key. Thank you for watching.